Welcome back to Just a Dude podcast, where we dive deep into the mind shaping our world today. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we are truly honored to have with us a visionary in the field of human behavior and organizational dynamics, Jim Marshall. Jim is not only the founder of the Septemics system, but also an author, consultant, and educator who has spent decades decoding the complexities of human interaction. His work has transformed how individuals and businesses approach personal growth, leadership, and conflict resolution. Today, we're going to explore the intricacies of the Septemics system and how it's changing lives one septum at a time. Jim, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Nathan. Good to see you.
What would you like the audience to know about you?
Well, they should know that I am the discoverer of hitherto unknown natural phenomena which greatly aid in the understanding of people, from which I created a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics and published it in the book, Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena.
Excellent. So what is Septemics then?
Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to humans occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7. Septemics comprises a collection of sequences or hierarchies, each of which relates to some specific human phenomena. I use phenomena because this is much bigger than behavior. Psychology is the study of behavior, and this is much bigger than that. Actually, this subject is so big that it's really impossible to convey how big it is in this form. I mean, we'll read the book, they say, wow, this is big.
Mm-hmm.
Because it basically spans the spectrum of human experience.
Yeah, and that's what I got from going over your website too, was just this is a huge, it's expansive. We're not going to cover it all in one podcast episode, right. But that's amazing. So how did you discover Septemics? How did you get on this journey?
Well, the story really begins when I was accepted into engineering school at the age of 16. Of course, I thought at that time that I would be engineering physical things, such as airfoils, motors, electrons, and so forth. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear that I wanted to engineer the human psyche, because that is the area of greatest mystery, of greatest unknown, and more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems in industrialized society are because people don't understand people. Don't understand the wife, don't understand the son, don't understand the boss, don't understand somebody who's running for office. That's why more than 50% of the adults in the United States are not married. And of the ones who are married, more than 50% of them get a divorce. Clearly, they're not understanding the people they're confronted with. So to make a long story short, I had a long career as a human development engineer, working one-on-one with hundreds of clients of every description for cumulatively many thousands of hours. Now, all of my clients improved as a result of our interaction, but I started to notice incidentally that I could predict the outcome of the session.
Really? Wow.
I never told that to anyone, but I made notes. I made careful notes. And as the decades rolled by, it became obvious to me that the client was at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed. And as a result of our interaction, he would go up to the next level on that scale. Now, this happened thousands and thousands of times. Sometimes it would happen 6 or 8 or 10 times in a session. And every time this occurred, it verified my hypothesis, because the clients knew nothing about this. I didn't tell them anything. I was extremely tight-lipped with my clients. It was about them. A guy comes to me and says, I have this marital problem. Can you help? I say, yes. We get into it. So to him, he's just telling me about his marital problem. See?
Right.
He doesn't know what I'm thinking, how I'm doing, what engineering principles I'm applying to this. He certainly doesn't know that I'm making notes about what I observe in these patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So by 1995, I had about 32 scales that I had simply observed in my clients. There's no theory of Septemics. This is all based on direct empirical observation. I simply wrote down what I saw. And by then, I had about 32 scales of varying lengths. Now, among them, I had one scale that by then I absolutely knew axiomatically was correct because I had been watching it work for decades. Now, one day I was pondering a difficult client, and I realized that this client was at a level on that scale that I had not previously observed. As soon as I saw what that level was, it was obvious to me where to insert it into the 6-level scale. That wasn't a question. And when I did, making the 6-level scale into a 7-level scale, at that moment, it manifested mathematically, meaning all of these data jumped out at me that I wasn't looking for. And at that instant, it went from being a line, which is what a scale is, to a plane, meaning a whole body of data that explicated this area of life. So in other words, I saw the whole spectrum. So this is a little bit like Sir Isaac Newton famously put a beam of white light through a prism and created a rainbow. Now, the rainbow is always the same. It's red, orange, yellow, green, etc.
Right.
There's no variation. That is what this is like. I was able to take these now 35 different areas of life and find the spectrum that creates this phenomena. So you can now parse it. So when I saw this, I said, whoa, whatever this is, this has to be natural law because it has mathematics embedded in it. Now, think about the Fibonacci sequence. Fibonacci, a great mathematician, observed that there were these numbers that kept showing up in nature, like in a sunflower seed. And he couldn't figure out why these numbers. And eventually, he was able to reverse engineer the formula out of the numbers. In other words, what formula creates these numbers showing up? And it's called the Fibonacci sequence. So that's natural law. It exists in nature. The creatures don't know anything about math, but they're constructing themselves according to these numbers. So there's something in nature called the Fibonacci sequence. That is what this is like. So I took 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it.
That's a lot of math.
To me, math is a very real thing. It's not some abstract thing you do on paper with a pencil. Okay? So I see it when it occurs in nature. And any mathematician has that, especially if he has a science background, which I do, because mathematics is the handmaiden of science. So without math, there would be no science or engineering. So I saw this thing and I said to myself, I wonder how many of these other scales are actually 7-level scales that had not been developed all the way, because I wasn't developing anything.
Right, you were just making observations.
Right, I was just helping my clients and making notes of interesting things. But by now, many decades had rolled by, and I knew these were correct because they kept showing up again and again and again, and nobody knew anything about this. So I then thought, I'm going to look into this. I inspected all the other scales, knowing what I was looking for, which in engineering is a big deal.
Right.
If you're looking for the right thing, you then can find it. So knowing what I was looking for, in a short period of time, each of these other scales developed into a 7-level scale. And when it did, it manifested mathematically. So now I had 32 scales, each of which had 7 levels and had mathematics embedded in them. I said, whoa, I think I found something here.
Yeah, you might be onto something.
Having gone to school for 28 years and being a very well-read person, I never saw anything like this anywhere. Now, several people have said to me, what book is your book like? And I have to tell them in all candor, I don't think there's ever been a book like this before.
I think I'd have to agree with you because I've, read what you have available on your website, and I was just blown away by the information.
Right.
I've never seen anything like it before, which is why I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Right. So the answer that I give them is there has never been a book like this before. But each of these 35 scales, there are now 35 scales, is very similar to the periodic table of elements, but for the corresponding subject.
That makes sense.
Yes. So I don't know if you can recall when you first looked at the periodic table, like a guy is maybe 12 or 13, he first sees it. He says, oh, this makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Hydrogen is here. Helium comes next. Lithium is third. And it's all horizontal and vertical. That model works. It's been in use now ever since all over the world. And I absolutely guarantee you, when we get to other planets that have civilized people, they're going to have a version of the periodic table.
That's
And
an
we can
interesting
show
thought.
them
Yeah.
ours, and they can show them theirs. And right there, we can begin to learn their language.
That's
and
amazing.
they're going to have the Pythagorean theorem. We could just show them the math on a piece of paper, and they'll have the same thing, because these things are embedded into the universe. Even if they're in another galaxy, they're going to have these things. They're going to have the 3 laws of motion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can communicate with them. Starting from there, see, we can get their word for motion, gribdabob. That's what they mean. It's motion, see?
Yep.
So that's how we would eventually work out how to speak to them. These skills are exactly like that. They are embedded into the nature of the universe. I simply stumbled onto them because of the nature of my work and because of my polymathic qualifications. I was able to see it for what it was. See, a lot of people would have just said, oh, this is interesting, and maybe wrote it down. But I, because of my polymathic qualifications, was able to see the depth and the breadth of this thing.
And so you were able to run with it.
Right. So now I said to myself, I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I have been doing as human development engineer, to helping people by the millions. If I could get this in a book and get it out to people so they can have it. People like you can read it and use it. So I'm going to have to write a book.
Absolutely.
Well, the first draft was finished in December of 95. And I then sent it in a transcript form to colleagues of mine, all of whom had graduate degrees in a variety of subjects. And they all responded very positively. They had different responses, but distinctly positive responses. And I have to tell you, some version of this book has existed now for 29 years. Nobody in that time has ever said to me anything like, this doesn't make any sense, I don't get it, or anything like that. That does not happen. You don't have to be a college graduate to get this. A guy looks at it and he says, oh, yeah, this makes sense. That's because it's natural law. That's why it makes sense to him. It resonates. It's not counterintuitive. So
Yeah.
I then spent, starting in 95, the next 25 years of my life working on this book. Because,
that's definitely a life's passion, right, Jim?
right. Because first I had to discover the phenomena, and I pretty much already told you how that happened. But you have to realize I would see this in sessions with my clients, and then I would go outside the session and observe people, and there was the same thing. I didn't even talk to these people. They didn't even know who I was. I would just see them manifesting these things. It's like somebody tells you about an obscure car like a Sunbeam. Most people don't know Sunbeam, right? And so like I had a friend as Sunbeam. So then there's a Sunbeam, or I look at it, it's got a Sunbeam,
Right.
because you know it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what happened with this. Once I saw the phenomena, it was everywhere. I could watch a video or a movie. There it is. So that just verified more to me. This is a real thing.
Yeah, so you weren't just seeing it in a controlled environment with clients, but you're
Right.
also observing it in nature, literally in nature.
Right. So after I observed the phenomena, then I had to use it to craft a workable philosophic system so that I could present that to people. That took 20 years.
I'm sure.
Now, you have to realize I am a dyed-in-the-wool engineer. When they tested me in my youth for aptitude, the top 3 things were 3 types of engineering. So when I was accepted into engineering schools, well, duh. Well, and I get to engineering school, to an elite engineering school. There's 2,000 students. We were all very much the same. Really, if you got past the superficial thing, this guy has freckles and this guy doesn't,
Right.
we're all very much the same. There's such a thing as an engineering type of person.
Mm-hmm.
People who know engineers know that. Some people like us and some people don't. But either way, that's who we are. Engineers are very practical people. They don't want to hear about woo-woo stuff. They want to know, what is the data? What is the factor of error? What technique did you use to take this measurement? See? So if you came to me and say, Jim, I want you to build a bridge over this stream. It's about 25 yards wide. I'd say, okay, let me take a look. I would not accept that data about 25 yards wide. I would ignore that completely. I would throw a laser beam across that stream. Where do you want it exactly? Here, throw the beam 4.3 yards or whatever it is, right? That's what I would use. Okay? So
precise.
That's how I am. So it took 20 years to work this into something that would work every time for every person who could read English. Now, the most time-consuming aspect of this, getting into the 25-year length, was finding the way to express this so it would make sense to the average person.
That was why I was thinking, as you were talking, that it probably took so long, because how can you put it in a form that the layperson can just understand?
That's right.
Without, exactly. So go ahead.
So part of this book was rewritten a half a dozen times. So what would happen is, I told you I released the original version in 95. When I got that positive feedback, I then rewrote the whole book. Knowing, okay, I've got something here. I've got to do this right. And then I would release it to my clients and my students and my colleagues and so forth. And I would get feedback. They would say, I had some trouble understanding X. And I would rewrite it. And I kept rewriting it until I got it to a point where it seemed to be foolproof. People got this. Here's what happens. I'll hand a guy doesn't know anything. I said, take a look at this. I open it to a certain scale, and he looks at it, right? And he says, scale of relationships. You mean there's a scale of relationships? And he looks at it. Yeah, I can see. Yeah, this makes sense, just like the periodic table. So as an engineer, I was devoted to results and facts. That's it. I'm not interested in anything else. This had to get results, and it had to be factual. So I went out of my way to not put opinions or beliefs into this at any point. Once I saw this is a part of nature, like the Pythagorean theorem. It's there, it's concise, okay? You have to express it in a way that makes sense to people. So a good geometry teacher will be able to explain that in one class to a student. We have this thing called the Pythagorean theorem. This is called a right triangle, see? And if this side is 3 and this side is 4, this side's going to be 5. See, how does he know that? Well, here's the formula. There's a formula. See? You get it. That's how this is. So some guy will look at this book, right? This happens all the time. And let's say he's looking at the scale of control. And he gets down to level 5 and he says, wait a minute. This is my mother-in-law. This is exactly how she is. Look, I don't know this guy's mother-in-law. I didn't even know he had a mother-in-law. In fact, I probably don't even know the reader. There are people all over the world reading this book. I'm never going to know who they are, what their names are, anything. But I still got it right. How did I get it right? Because it's natural law. You see, some guy might look at his property and say, well, it's 100 yards on this way, and it's 200 yards on this way. But I want to make a diagonal path, so I'll have to go out there and measure it off with a ruler of some kind. Well, once he knows the Pythagorean theorem, he doesn't have to do that. He just plugs it into the formula, and he will get it exactly to as many decimal places as he wants it to be. See? He doesn't have to go through it. That is what these skills are like. I did the heavy lifting of figuring this out and giving it to the people of Earth. So about 23 years ago, I'm talking to a buddy of mine. This is when I was obviously working on the book. And it was, in the rewrite stage. And we're just standing around, two buddies talking about politics and government. So I thought, wait a minute, I want to show this guy this. So I had the scale of government by then. I had figured it out. So I pulled it out and I handed it to him. I did not say a word. I did not even say, look at this. I simply handed it to him saying nothing. And he took it. And in about 1 second, he pointed to a certain level. He said, right there, I'm right there.
He could relate to it.
His level on the scale without my even suggesting that that's what it was for. That's how easy this is to use. Okay?
That's amazing.
So, for example, in my travels in mathematics, I would get, let's say, on the SAT or something, I would get, wait a minute, I can use the Pythagorean theorem here. I just have to divide it, run it through, get the number, and there it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's your area, done. So even though the problem did not mention the Pythagorean theorem and was not really about a right triangle, I had this data and I could just look at it and fit it right in and solve the problem. See?
Right.
That's what mathematicians do, right? You've got this curve and you want to know what is the area underneath this curve. That's what calculus is for, okay? There it is. There's your area. I don't have to measure anything. That's how this works. So instead of going blah, 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 and stumbling over your own feet for 6 months, you could figure out in 10 minutes, where is this person on this scale? See? So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a couple that's been dating for 2 years, and they're talking about getting married. So the guy's thinking about it, right? So wouldn't it be smart to ask the question, why does this person want to marry me?
I would think so.
Isn't that a reasonable question? I'm not saying to ask the partner. I'm saying get out the book. There's a scale of motivation. That answers the question, why? So the guy knows this woman. He's been hanging around with her for 2 years. He reads the chapter, says, I can see her motivation is that she loves me. That's level 1 on the scale. Well, maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe he looks at it and says, now that I think about this, I think she wants to marry me because I drive a Lamborghini, I have a 60-foot yacht, I fly my own Learjet, I live in a $15 million condo, and I have $8 million in the bank. See, that's a different motivation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's good or bad or right or wrong or anything, but It's just, that's what it is. Now, what he does with it is up to him. That's not for us to say. He might look at it and say, okay, she wants to marry me for my money. That's not news. That happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But she's beautiful. She's smart. She's funny. I enjoy being with her. So I'm going to marry her anyway. That could happen. But maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe he says, wait a minute. This woman is a gold digger. I don't want to marry a gold digger.
That's exactly where I went when you brought up the situation. I said, nobody wants to be with a gold digger. Well, I don't want to say nobody, but a lot of people don't.
Right. He might say, I want somebody who loves me for myself. And a lot of people do conceal their wealth to find out if the person really loves them. So he might say, gold digger, we're done, breaks up with her. Now, you might think in that latter case that he would be upset about this, and you would be wrong. He's not going to say, lost my baby,
Mm-hmm.
He's going to say, wow, did I dodge a bullet?
Yep.
I got out of this before I wound up owing her $15,000 a month in alimony.
Mm-hmm.
See? So he's relieved.
Yeah.
And here's why. One of the axioms of this subject, it has 12 axioms, which are on my website if you want to see them. One of the axioms is that every time you correctly spot a level of anyone, whether it's yourself or another, on any scale, you have a realization. So it's like this guy says, now I understand why she said this and did that. She's a gold digger. See, before he didn't understand it. He could not extrapolate it into what was really going on. But I'm giving him the data. So now that you mention it, see, there are only 7 human motivations, and all the others, the thousands of others, are subsets of these. So that's why this is easy to use, because you're only selecting from a field of 7.
Yeah, instead of millions.
That's right. Instead of, you go to a good restaurant and they have like 200 things on the menu. I mean, you fall asleep reading the wine menu, But there are some restaurants, they have so few things. They just have a little board up there, hamburger, cheeseburger, vanilla shake, chocolate shake, French fry. It's very easy to select, isn't it?
It is.
So that makes this useful to you because every human being is at some level on every scale. There are no exceptions.
That makes sense.
It's just like a blood pressure. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a blood pressure.
Well, if
You
you don't, you're
don't,
dead.
that's right. If you don't have it, you're not a person, you're a corpse.
Exactly.
You're hauling freight. You're not driving with somebody. So when you go to the doctor, one of the first things they do every time you go in is they take your blood pressure. Why is it? They know you have one, but they don't know what it is. It changes. Oh, it's gone up 3 points since the last time you were in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now they know, okay, that's it. They write it down. And then the next time you come in, they have that frame of reference. So that is what this is like. Everybody is somewhere. And that is useful to you because it's not like, gee, I wonder if this applies to Joe. I'm telling you, it applies.
Yeah. I
Now,
think that's a good segue, Jim, to say, what is Septemics beneficial?
right. So I wrote this book to help people. I've had a lifetime of helping people. Each of these 35 scales provides the user with an infallible way of determining the salutariness or beneficialness of any group, individual, or activity. If the group, individual, or activity moves persons up these scales, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. So I'm giving you a yardstick by which to manage human affairs, which is an entirely new thing. More
Yes.
importantly, just finding out, I mentioned this a minute ago, just finding out what level you or another person is at on any scale is by itself inherently beneficial because you have an epiphany. You look at, I see where this guy is.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I'm a serious student of history, and American history is one of my areas of expertise. So George Washington, right, the founder of our nation, how many hundred books have been written about him?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So obviously I read some of those books. So, when I got this date, I started saying, I wonder where he is, Took me some time because John Adams famously said of Washington, he has the gift of silence. He was not a loquacious person.
No, not at all.
He tended to just say the few things that needed to be said. Sometimes he'd nod, or smile. He was not a talkative person like John Adams was.
Mm-hmm.
So it took some time. I had to read many of the things he wrote.
Right,
So
because you couldn't directly observe him, obviously.
But after a while, I got, I see. He's at level 3 on the scale of basic purposes. And when I saw that, I had an epiphany. Now I understand him. Now I know why he kept wanting to go home to Mount Vernon. I mean, he was just conquered the British and was the general. He could become the king of America. In those days, that's what normally happened. He didn't do that. He gave up his sword and he went back to his home.
Yep.
That's what somebody at level 3 would do. So King George famously said, if he does that, he'll be the greatest man in the world. You know what? He was the greatest man in the world.
He was, and very humble man, too, from what I've read.
Yes, he understood that Washington had less education than Jefferson and Adams. Jefferson was not only well-educated, he was a genius.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he made him Secretary of State.
Yep.
He knew well that he should rely on these other people to take these certain roles that had gifts in those areas. See? So when I figured that out, then I understood him completely. Because level 3 is what I call the winner on that scale.
Nice.
That person who wants to win. Mm-hmm. That's what he's about, winning. He wants to win. There are some people, they can play a softball game. Doesn't matter whether they win or lose. They're still happy and have a beer afterwards. Some guys, they want to win. If you don't win, they are bummed out. I'm not going out for beer. We lost. I'll see you at the next game. See?
Right. We got to practice harder.
He wants to win. So once you know that, you can predict what this person is going to do. And that's true across 35 scales. Now, once you correctly identify the level of a person on any scale, whether it's your own or another's, you can now move that person up to the next level. This is monumentally important. Let me explain why. I have solved the gradient problem that has bedeviled mankind for 6,000 years. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Most people have problems, dilemmas, situations, difficulties. They can't resolve it. They can't figure it out. They don't know what to do, right? More than 99% of the time, it's because they don't know the gradient. Every good teacher, coach, facilitator, therapist on earth understands that human development must be done on a gradient. You cannot make an Olympic athlete out of a couch potato.
Right.
Cannot be done. There are too many intervening levels. Now, you can bring them up to maybe being a normal person as a first level, and then bring them up to maybe being a weekend amateur athlete, you see. And then after a while, 10 years later, maybe he can be an Olympic athlete. But you can't go from Z to A. There are two things in between. So that is what these scales tell you. So if you find your level, right, you know it's correct because you had an epiphany. Now I see why you don't get along with Gertrude. She's at this level and I'm at that level. That's a conflict. So now the guy says, well, I'm going to move myself up to the next level. Now, if he makes a serious attempt, he will get to that level. If you're at level 4 and you try to get to level 1 or 2, you will fail. But if you try to get to level 3 and you make a serious attempt, you will get there because it's the next thing up.
It's the next natural movement, right?
Right. Just like if you're on the 2nd floor, you can go up the stairs and now you're on the 3rd floor. There's no way to get to the 5th floor without going through the 3rd and the 4th. So one of the axioms of this subject is it's impossible to skip a level. Now, sometimes you go through a level quickly or easily or without realizing you did, but you went through nevertheless. This is helpful to you because when you find your level, you throw out the other ones. That's not relevant. You pay attention only to the next one up. That's where you're going to go.
So forward thinking.
Right. But it's specific. You see, you found the gradient. Now, I worked as a professional trainer. If somebody said to me, Jim, I'm 100 pounds overweight, I can't fix this. Can you help me? I'd say, sure, I'll train you. I'm not going to give that guy a 100-pound barbell and say, lift this.
Or tell him to go run 6 miles the first time out.
I'm not going to do that. That's malpractice. I'm going to find the gradient. I'm going to talk to him, look at his arms, say, okay, let's see if you can curl 15 pounds. So I give him a 15-pound dumbbell. So he's doing it now. And he gets to, let's say, 10, and he says, I could do this all day. Okay, that's fine. Good.
Now we're going to bump you up.
Here's a 20. That's right. So he gets to about 8, and he says, yeah, this is starting to get hard. I say, okay, how many can you do? Maybe 13. Good. I want you 13 reps on each arm every day, 3 times. And at the end of the week, we'll talk again. So I come back at the end of the week. I say, how are you doing? He says, I'm doing it, but it's still a little tough. I say, okay, keep doing it. But if he says, no, this has gotten quite easy, I go to 25. Let's see. Now, the reps are going to go down. He's not going to be able to do 13.
Right.
Maybe he can do 11. Okay, do 11. 3 sets every day, both arms. And at the end of the week, we'll see, that is what I did with my clients for 40 years. I would find the level the person was at, and I would move him up to the next level. The clients didn't know that. They didn't know that I could see this guy is at level 4 on the scale of control. They didn't know anything about the scale of control. See, because I did not evaluate my clients. I just helped them. And what I did was very complicated and specific. It was engineering. I used biofeedback. And so they didn't know any of that. It took me a lifetime to develop that skill and that knowledge, how to use engineering devices and principles and tactics and strategies to help a person to become enlightened, more responsible, more ethical. See, it's like most people have no clue that can be done. And I did it professionally. So
it gives Septemics gives good benefits to individuals by not only allowing them to know where they are on the scale and where they can go, but also to use it with the relationships that they're in or that they may build to see where that person is, to see where maybe they can work together a little bit better, depending on the 2 scales that might be different.
Right. And the beauty of this is it's all natural law. It's all based on direct empirical observation. And because of that, people get it. I've been
Yeah.
watching this for 29 years. People look at the scale, they say, oh, yeah, this makes sense to me. It's not hard to get.
Right.
You get it in one day, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe there are some subtleties about it that you learn as you go along, but there's nothing counterintuitive about it. There's an awful lot of stuff in the area of human phenomena that is vague, imprecise, unknown, okay? And I say unknown in quotes because to me it's known. But to them, if you talk to most guys and they're truthful, they'll admit they don't understand women.
Yeah, I'll be truthful on that and say I agree.
Like, yes, I love my wife. I'm happy with her, but I sure as hell don't understand her. I don't know why she does this, and this, but somehow we muddle. So look, this guy could assess his wife's level on all 35 scales because the data is there. She's on these scales. So he looks at, now she's at this level. And every time he does it, he has a realization. And so his relationship with her just got better because she's a little bit smarter. Now, by the time he assesses her against 35 scales, he's going to understand her better than she understands herself because this data is precise, accurate, and specific. So let me give you an analogy so you can see how this works.
Sure.
Let's say you invited me to your garden, right? Because I'm a gardener.
Mm-hmm.
So you say, Jim, come over and look at my garden. Okay, so I go to Nathan's garden, and you take me there, and I'm like, oh, he's got hydrangeas, irises, nasturtiums, chrysanthemums, roses, tulips, forget-me-nots. Now, the reason I can do that is I've been involved in gardening since I was a little boy. I can analyze it, see? And if you wanted, I could even advise you, well, this one needs a lot of shade, and this one needs a lot of sun. This one needs a lot of water, this one needs less, and so forth. That is how Septemics works. Now, if you take some 5-year-old kid and you bring him into your garden, he's going to see and smell exactly what I saw and smelled, right? Mm-hmm. But all he can say is, these are pretty and they smell nice.
Yep.
That's all he knows. He doesn't know the word chrysanthemum. And even if you taught him the word chrysanthemum, he still doesn't know anything about how you take care of it. How much water does it need? You see, he doesn't know botany. Now, most adults are like that little kid as regards human beings. They don't know what they're looking at. That is why all over the world, people routinely elect morons and criminals to run their governments. They don't understand.
That's true.
Yeah. So I can.
They don't understand. And sometimes they don't take the time to understand or research. Right. And yeah, absolutely.
They have no frame of reference for it. So, for example, I know the basic purpose of every president of the United States, going back as far as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and many of the presidents prior to him who I studied, such as Lincoln and Washington and Jefferson. This is a big thing. Basic purpose is what the person is trying to do all the time, whether he's successful or not. That's a big thing to understand about a person. What is this guy trying to do? So, Dad, for example, take St. Francis of Assisi. His father was a rich merchant, and he expected Francis to grow up and take over the business and be another rich merchant, right? Francis was not interested in that. Francis founded the Franciscan order because he was at level 1 on the scale of basic purposes, which is transcendence. That's what he wanted.
That's amazing.
And if you study the man, which I did, he had powers that most people don't have because he was at level 1. The dad was probably pulling his hair out saying, what's wrong with this guy? I'm giving him this business. He can step right into it. He wasn't interested.
Yeah.
This goes on all the time, right?
Yeah, we see it all the time throughout the world.
All the time, right?
People that we talk to on a daily basis probably had a situation similar to that at some point.
That's right. There's a famous actor, Walter Matthau, now deceased. Brilliant actor. And when he was in the movie, the original movie, The Odd Couple, I think it was 1968, if I remember correctly. Huge hit. So he goes to visit his mother, and everybody knew about this movie because it was so big. She said to him, how much money did you make from this movie? Now, realize this is 1968, right, when the money was worth a lot more than it is now. He said about $1 million.
Wow.
And she said to him, you could have been a doctor. He didn't want to be a doctor.
No.
He wanted to be an actor, and he made a good choice. He was a great actor.
He was a great
One
actor,
of the
yeah.
few people who could play comedy and drama both equally well. And anything you saw him in, it was a delight, especially if you're into movies and you understand acting.
Mm-hmm.
So, perfect example, his mother was thinking about, she wanted him to fit into some slot, and he didn't want to be in that slot. This is really important. So I'll tell you a true story. About 6 months ago, I'm a single guy. I met this beautiful blonde. Looked like a movie star, right? Very glamorous. So we're going through the usual preliminaries.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do for a living? What do you like to do on the weekends? What kind of a car do you drive? What neighborhood do you live in? Blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so your normal get to know you type of things.
Right. We had like 6 or 8 conversations like that. So we're having a conversation. I notice, she's low on this scale. Okay. So we're having another conversation, and I realize, she's low on this scale. We had another conversation, she's low on this other scale. And then I saw the red light go on. Whoa. Do I really want to get involved? Because the people who cause all the trouble are the people who are at or near the bottom of all these scales. Like Hitler. He was at level 7 on the scale of basic purposes.
Which is the base level, right?
His purpose was to destroy.
It was, yep.
When many people, first of all, they can't say, why would that be somebody's basic purpose? Clearly, the Nazis didn't know that. They thought he was the greatest guy in the world.
Yeah.
But, I'm a serious scholar as regards military science. Obviously, he was the commander-in-chief of the Germans during World War II. Yep. And when I was studying it, this is going back many years because I started studying this when I was in my teens. Mm-hmm. See, he did this. I'd say, why did he do that? We know from military science not to do that. Military science has been around for thousands of years. There's things we know. And then we get to another, why did he do that? That doesn't make any sense. Well, there are 6 or 8 catastrophic mistakes he made that anybody who's been through a military academy would never make, okay?
Mm-hmm.
His generals knew this. His generals were very well trained. They all went to military academies, see? They knew he was a nut job. So they told him, if the Americans get in the war, we will lose because their industrial output exceeds that of all of Europe combined. He declared war on the United States gratuitously. He didn't have to do that.
No.
Big mistake. Because if he hadn't, Roosevelt would have had a very hard time getting Americans to fight the Germans. Now, the Americans wanted to fight the Japanese because they had been attacked. But prior to that, America was an isolationist country. They didn't want to get involved in what's going on in Europe. That had gone on since George Washington, who said, do not get entangled in alliances.
Yeah, there was a whole reason we left England, right?
Right. Once I saw that he was at level 7, then I understood it. It all made sense to me then. So now, I get to the fact that he had a non-aggression pact with the Russians, but he attacked them. That doesn't make any sense. He put himself into a 2-front war. He was told by Hermann Goering, his second in command, if the Russians get in the war, we will lose because of their vast resources and because of the way they behave. It is often said, a Russian soldier knows how to die. Mm-hmm. The Russians lost 20 million people in World War II, far more than anybody else. They just kept throwing men at the Nazis. Nazis would mow them down. Like they throw 10,000 men. They would throw 10,000 men, and they had a machine gun back there. If you retreated, they killed you. Mm-hmm. Well, only the Russians would do that. Even the Nazis didn't do that. So they would attack. The Russians would lose 10,000 men. The Germans would lose maybe 1,000. So you would say, well, the Germans won that. But that kept happening and happening and happening. They just overwhelmed them. They just kept making tanks and making tanks. See? And Churchill and Roosevelt very wisely got the Russians to attack the Germans on land. Mm-hmm. They didn't for years. They sent bombers there, but you don't lose thousands and thousands of men. you lose maybe 8 men if a plane goes in, right? So that was very shrewd of them. So all of this is, I understood it all once I realized this guy's purpose was to destroy. Now, this is true across 35 scales. And I'd like to tell you what the names of the 35 scales so you'll know exactly what subject matter is addressed in the book. May I do that?
Yeah,
This takes a minute.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
go right ahead.
So there are 24 individual scales, meaning they apply to an individual, and 11 scales, meaning they apply to a group. So these are the individual scales: the scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales: the scale of life, the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Every one of these named subjects is a big deal.
Yeah, I'm sitting here as you're reciting those scales thinking, you just covered every aspect of human life in those scales.
Right. And that is why I explain it spans the spectrum of human experience. Any problem, dilemma, situation, difficulty, that problem that any human has that has to do with people can be analyzed by one or more of these scales, usually more than one. So let me give you an example of that. Let's say you have your friend Bob. Every time you talk to Bob, he says, "Nathan, I don't know what I'm going to do. My wife is driving me nuts." You say, "Really? What's going on?" He says, "Well, she's drinking. She's not cleaning the house. She yells at me. I think she's cheating on me. She spends money like water. I don't know what I'm going to do." Right? So you say, after a while, you get tired of listening to this. So you say, "Bob, let me show you something." And you open the book to the scale of relationships. And you put it in front of his face. He can read English. He's going to look at it and he's going to say, "You mean there's a scale of relationships?" You say, "Yes. This relationship that you've been complaining to me about for 6 months, where is it on this scale?" Guaranteed he's going to want to know that.
Yeah.
Because he's having a lot of trouble.
And he wants it.
He's going to be like a magnet drawn to this. So he's going to look at it, and in a matter of seconds, he will find a bracket. For example, he'll say something like, "Well, I can see right away. We're definitely not at 1, 2, or 3, because that's the top of the scale. We're having a lot of trouble." You say, "Okay, good. You got it down to 4. Why don't you just read the text and then you can get it exactly?" Well, he knows her, right? He's been living with her for years and years. That's not an issue, right? So now he studies it. It's explained very clearly, okay, in the book. So he reads it, and he comes back, and he says, "Well, I can see now we're at level 5. When we're having a lot of trouble." That explains why. See, that tells you he found the right level because he has his realization. It zeroes right in.
And that's how you can begin to use Septemics to help someone. Is
right.
First they identify where they are, and then they can see where they can go.
Right. And you say to him, "Bob, you could move this relationship from 5 up to 4. He says, "You can?" You say, "Yeah, it tells you in the book how to do that." But before you do that, let me show you something else. And you open the book to the scale of sexuality. Well, that's relevant, isn't it? It's his wife.
Absolutely.
Same thing's going to happen. He's going to say, "You mean there's a scale of sexuality?" You say, "Yeah. You don't have to tell me if you don't want, but for your own illumination, where are you on this scale?" See? So now he's going to look at it, and in a matter of seconds, 20 seconds, 25 seconds, he's going to say, "Well, I can see right away. Definitely not 6 or 7. That has nothing to do with me." Okay, good. So you got it down to 5. Go ahead and read it, and then you can get it exactly. So he reads it. He comes back. "Well, now that I read it, I can see he knows where he's at. It's level 4. I can see him at level 4. Okay, good. So now what about Gertrude? See, maybe she's at level 5. Well,
Hmm.
that would explain right there why they can't get along, because those are
Yeah.
conflicting levels. If you look at that scale, you can see those levels are definitely incompatible. There's no subtlety about it. 4 is can have sex, 5 is cannot have sex.
Yeah,
Well, duh.
that's pretty
Yeah,
incompatible, I would say.
yeah, yeah. So he says, let's go to bed. She says, I got a headache. I'm going to go to sleep. She's at level 5. So once she realizes that, now, see, I could keep doing this now with 10 or 20 or 25 different scales and going through
Right.
the same hypothetical analysis for you. But I think I made my point. So now
Yeah.
you see how this
Go ahead.
works, right? So
Hmm.
now he might say, let me borrow this book because I want to use it with Gertrude to straighten out our relationship. So you might loan him the book, or you might just say, you can get it online,
Yep.
ebook for 10. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
do that.
Get your own copy.
Yeah. So this could go a couple of ways. By the time he analyzes this through maybe 20 or 25 different scales, he's really going to understand this relationship. He's going to know, because every time he finds a level, he has a realization.
Right.
Oh, that's why that happened. That's why she does this. That's why I can't do that. So after a while, one of a couple of things is going to happen. He might say, I'm going to get Gertrude involved in this, and we're going to straighten this all out using this book by moving us up to the next level. Or
Hmm.
he might say, you know what, Nathan, I'm done with this broad.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this anymore, and breaks up with her. So either way, he's going to be happy. He's going to say, boy, am I glad I figured this out now. I'm banging my head against the brick wall. The wall is winning. So
Yeah. Right.
that this guy could have spent $25,000 going for therapy on this.
Yeah.
Or he
Yep.
could have spent another 10 years and wound up becoming an alcoholic because he's in a
Hmm.
bad relationship. Or they might have
Yep.
wound up having an acrimonious divorce. There's a lot of ways this can go, but none of it's going to be good if he doesn't understand what the hell is going on. So that's what this
Exactly.
is. And you have to understand, this is natural law. The reason I wrote the book is because it's natural law. So
Yeah, and
these
even
skills,
the scales that you've noticed there's nothing uh out there about them, right?
well,
The scales that it's not like there's something that I've never heard about in my life, that this is just a wacko idea. It's literally stuff that we see every day.
right. So I did essentially the same thing that Isaac Newton did in his study of optics. I shine white light through a prism and I got 7 colors.
Yep.
That's what these 7 levels are. It's the spectrum for that. So take the scale of evaluation. There are 7 levels of evaluation. That's it. Not 8, not 11, 7. And when you read it, you'll see, yeah, this makes sense. I can see there's 7
Yep.
levels here. So it's very easy to use because of that. So I crafted, while I was writing this, crafted these skills to wrap around the reader. So the experience that you have when you read this book is not like you're reading math, although it's
Hmm.
got math in it. I went out
Sure.
of my way to not show the math. The method, the way you appreciate it is, it's like you took a lens and you held up the lens to Gertrude, or you
Hmm.
held up the lens to the mirror so you can see yourself better, or see your wife better, or see your boss better. Because when you see them better, you see all the things that you couldn't see before. Oh,
Yep.
now I
I love
see.
that.
So let me give you an example. When Obama ran for president, I had no idea who this guy was.
Yeah, you and
He
me
had
both.
only, he had only been in the Senate for 2 years, right? He was
Hmm.
not a national figure. And unless you're somebody who really pays attention to this stuff, who's this guy with this front? Well, I knew he was a senator. That's all I knew because I heard it mentioned Senator Obama. Okay. So I
Hmm.
thought, this guy's running for president. I better find out. So I conducted a septemic analysis. It took me a while. So what I did is I went out of my way to listen to his speeches carefully, observe him, look at his body language, and connect all of this together. And after all, the light bulb went on over my head. I see what this guy's basic purpose is. And that informed me as to whether I wanted to
To vote for
vote
him or
for
not,
him or
right?
not.
Yeah.
So that's a really important thing to know. So I'm not going to tell you what I discovered because I tell everybody, never tell anyone the level of any living person on any scale. It's counterproductive and unethical because, remember I said, when the person finds it himself, he has an epiphany, and you're going to take that away from him. One aspect of it is that you're taking away the realization that the guy's going to have when he figures it out himself. And the other thing is, people don't like to be evaluated.
That's true.
Like the wife goes to the husband and says, you know what's wrong with you? You're not ambitious enough. You need to get an extra job. That's not helping him. That's making him think about getting a divorce. What she should say is, come here, let me show you something. And she shows him the book. What's this book? This is a book that will help you to focus your life better and maybe make more money and maybe have a better life. Really? Yeah, read it. That's the way to handle it.
And that's a more inviting way to get someone to look at themselves and let them make that epiphany on their own.
Right. The reason that I'm confident that this works is that it's natural law. It's
and
like
so you would say this works for everyone, right?
Right. Now, let me give you a caveat on that. This book is for anyone who can read English reasonably well and wants to improve himself or others. Right. So it leaves out the people who can't read English. But there's also a lot of people who don't want to improve themselves or others. Some people don't realize that. There are, you have the nice social worker who wants to help everybody and is frustrated as hell, right? Because people who don't want to improve themselves are many different groups: psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, career criminals, corrupt politicians, war criminals, insane people, morons, ignoramuses. There's lots of people. They're not up to this idea of reading something and improving yourself. They're not there. So this book is not for them. Now, I have actually calculated that about 50% of the human race wants to improve himself or others or both.
Yep, that seems reasonable.
Yeah. And if you actually study the book and look at the scales, you can see people at the bottom of the scales, they're not interested in improving. You think Adolf Hitler was interested in improving himself?
No.
You think Joseph Stalin was interested in improving himself?
No.
You think Pol Pot was interested in improving others? Okay? No. So there's lots of these, right? So you have some guy who lives at or near the bottom of a whole bunch of these scales. He's a professional criminal, a drug addict, and a wife beater. You know why he's like that? Because he's at or near the bottom of all these scales.
Yep.
So you can spot this guy. So, for example, John Gotti, who was the head of the Gambino crime family, died in prison.
Yep. Right.
Because he was a dumb thug. Now, when I say he was a dumb thug, the FBI had been taping him for years and years and years without him knowing it.
Yep.
They had all these tapes. I've heard some of those tapes. When I say he was a dumb thug, that's clear. All right? We're not talking about a bright person. That's why he died in prison. Now, Carlo Gambino himself, after whom this family was named, was a very smart. They never got anything on him. He lived in my neighborhood in New York. I walked past his house 10,000 times. Everybody knew where he lived, what car he drove. Oh, yeah, this is where Carlo Gambino lives. See? He was a friend of my father. He was a very smart man. He was shrewd. They couldn't get anything on him. There was no evidence, even though they had a police car parked in front of his house for years. I don't know
Everybody
why.
knew, but nobody could get proof, right?
That's right. Because if you study the man, and of course, there's lots of people who knew him, both in the Mafia and out, who have talked about him. He was the person on whom The Godfather was based.
I did not know that.
Yes. And if you see the Godfather movie or read the book, we're talking about a smart man here. A man who died in his own home, just like Carlo Gambino. So Gambino, he, on the scale of basic purposes, was at level 4. He's what I call the normal. This is a guy who wanted to fit in. Everybody who knew, he never had custom-made suits like John Gotti. He never drove in a limousine or a big Cadillac. He didn't live in a mansion. He lived in a regular middle-class home. And he was a very normal guy. He just
So he
happened to
acted
be in the
just like,
Mafia for a little.
yeah. So he worked in the Mafia, but around town he was just like you or I.
But let me tell you, how did he get in the Mafia? He was born into the Mafia.
Yeah.
His father was in the Mafia. So as he was growing up, he saw this is what they did. This is how they made money. They had a nice living. They were treated with respect. It's pretty good. Okay. He was fitting in. He was fitting in with his family. He sent his son to the same college that I went to. This is a very normal guy. Now,
Yeah.
did he commit crimes? Of course. Did he have people
Sure.
killed? Of course. I'm just saying they never caught him because he wasn't a dumb thug. He was not at the bottom of that scale
Yeah, he
like
wasn't a
Hitler
level
and Stalin.
7. Yeah.
Right. Or even a level 6. He was at level 3. Level 4.
4.
He wanted to fit in, and he did. He did. And there are many photographs of him, like there's a photograph of him with a bunch of people, all in the Mafia with Frank Sinatra,
Mm-hmm.
And he just looked like a regular guy, smiling, Now, I can tell you, I bumped into the actual godfather of Rockland County when I lived in New York. All right?
Mm-hmm.
This guy was the scariest person I ever saw. I mean, this guy walked in the room, and you know right away this guy was a murderer.
You just got
Okay?
that feeling, right?
Scary guy. I mean, if you pay attention to Charles Manson, you can see he's not a normal person,
Yeah, correct.
right? Okay. So it turned out that some friends of mine were relatives of his. So they went over and shook hands. I didn't even go over. Very atypical because I'm a very friendly person. I just looked at this guy, and he had like a long table, and everybody sitting aside him like the Last Supper, with him in the middle. The
Yeah.
godfather of his scary guy. Now, there was no Septemics back then, but I was able to see this was not a normal guy. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
most people, I talked about this beautiful blonde who I met 6 months ago, right? I dismissed her. I could see she was going to be a lot of trouble
Mm-hmm.
because the people at the bottom of the scale are the ones who cause all the trouble. But if you find somebody who's at or near the bottom of 4 or 5 scales, run for your life. And
That's
that
good to
is
know.
why I can absolutely guarantee to your viewers that this book, if you read it, will prevent catastrophes, dilemmas, bankruptcies, indictments, lawsuits, divorces, fistfights, etc., because when you see somebody who's at or near the bottom of the scale, you can spot it. Sometimes it's obvious, and sometimes it's not. Took me a while to figure out that Carl Gambino was at level 4 because I never met him personally, but
Mm-hmm.
I read a lot about him. I know many people on the internet talk about him, and so you begin to piece this together. It's like a puzzle.
Right.
You have this puzzle. You don't know what it's a picture of, and you put it, I see, it's a barn with a house, That's what this is like. So this is very user friendly. That's what I
That's good.
wanted it to be.
And I think for my listeners, with the premise of just a dude, it's just the idea of just regular people, that are interested in different things. And, this is a great reason why I had you on, Jim, because I figured, we can read the website and get a little bit of information. But when you explain it, it just makes me want to go pick up a book and read it.
And I have to tell you, the reaction that people have who actually read is something like, wow.
Like an epiphany, like, oh my goodness.
It blows their mind sequentially. Like they read the first one, they say, wow. Then they get to the second one. Wow. And they get to the third one. Wow. Like one reviewer said, it's an eye-opener.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about it that way, but yes, it's an eye-opener. When you read this, it opens your eyes. You say, yeah, scale of literacy. See, most people think there are 2 levels of literacy. Either you're literate or you're illiterate. No, there are 7 levels. And most people are not what this scale defines as literate. Most of them are below that. They're at level 4, 5, 6, or 7. Level 4
I
is
can
what I
see
call
that.
literate. And then
I
there
know
are
we
3
have a lot of
levels
trouble. Yeah. Because I know we have a lot of trouble with literacy in the U.S. And so that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So, when you see that spectrum, 7 levels of literacy. For example, I know for a fact that there are many people with graduate degrees who are not literate at the septemic definition. They're not. I'll give you an example. I have a friend who's a doctor, very successful surgeon, highly regarded, went to a good school, really knows what she's doing. So I had read a popular novel that I loved. And so just socially, when I saw her, I say, "Here, I enjoyed this. You want to read it?" She said, "Okay." So the next time I saw her, a couple of weeks later, she hands me back the book and said, and I quote, "I can't read this book." Now, you would think somebody who had a doctorate would be able to read a novel that has been
right.
read by millions of people. Couldn't do it. And because, we were friends, she was honest enough to say, "I can't read this."
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she would have said that to other people. So now this is a person with a doctorate. So most people don't know that most people are at either level 5, 6, or 7. They think, well, modern society, everybody can read or write. It's not that simple.
It's just not
There's
true.
7 levels. And it tells you all kinds of things. For example, if I were talking to Dr. Jordan Peterson, who I've listened to extensively,
Mm-hmm.
I would have no trouble talking to him at the same level, at eye level, because I would have complete confidence that he would understand everything I say. And if he didn't, he would say, "What do you mean by that?" Because he's a highly literate person. He's got several college degrees. Now, if for example, I have housekeepers, gardeners, auto mechanics, right? All these people who work for me, who I have relationships with, I have to modify the way I speak when I speak to them. Because, like, I'll have, let's say, a housekeeper. I know from having spoken with this person, he's either semi-literate or subliterate. So I'm not going to use words like quotidian or antediluvian or quixotic. He's going to look at me like I'm nuts. So I'm going to use, words he understands.
Sure. A little more basic language.
Right. And so I do. We get along fine. I give him instructions. It's very clearly stated in words he's going to understand. So you see, I'm happy to have this guy clean my house. He does a good job. I'm happy to pay him. But I'm not going to sit down and have a discussion with this guy about the philosophy of Oswald Spengler. He's going to say, "Oswald Spengler, who's that? Isn't that the guy who owns the delicatessen on 3rd Street?" There's no Oswald Spenglers. So I'm not even going to go there. But if I mention it to William F. Buckley, he knows right away who Oswald Spengler is. We can have a whole discussion about it. There's actually a video that I saw in which William F. Buckley and Kissinger.
Yes.
Buckley had Kissinger on his show, Firing Line, and they were talking about Spengler, going back and forth, And, I just ate it with a spoon. I mean, I loved it. 2 brilliant men talking about another brilliant man, right at my alley. So, I mean, there's a lot of people would not understand what either of these guys were saying, and I certainly would not know who Spengler. So, that was good. They could talk on that same level. Or there's another show we had Noam Chomsky on. Now, those 2 men, Chomsky and Buckley, disagreed about everything. But they were able to have a highly intelligent, articulate conversation. No name calling. No, why do you think? Oh, is that your position? Well, let me clarify my position. So it was like, yeah, that was fun to watch. 2 smart guys. See, I didn't have sides. I get to listen to 2 smart guys. So you can see this all the time in the media. For example, how many times has Elon Musk been interviewed? Hundreds, right? Hundreds of times, right? And any one of them that I find, I watch. I want to hear what he has to say. And you can just see from the way he speaks, the way he thinks, that he's vastly superior to that interviewer. They're not on the same level. And this is useful not only in finding the people you don't want to be around, but in finding the people you do want to be around. So, for example, when I moved to Arizona 10 years ago, I met a person, and we had our first conference, and it was nice. We sat down. This was an educated person, and I could see right away this person is high in this scale, high in this scale, high in this. This is an upscale person. This is somebody who's going to be an asset to me. And we have remained associated for all this time, and it has been of benefit to me the whole time. Now, further, let me tell you something. This person is a little bit lower on some scales, which is how most of us are.
We're not going to match up on every scale, right?
Right. When I spot that, I can tiptoe around it because I know that this person is low on the scale. So it preserves the relationship. So, for example, I have a buddy, love the guy, wonderful person, smart, successful, beautiful family, et cetera, et cetera. This guy is what I would call a political extremist. When politics comes up, I just realize I'm not going to get involved in this, and I tiptoe around it. First time there's a pause in the situation, they say, so how is your son? See?
Change that direction.
That's right. So you see, I can preserve the relationship. So I have 3 sisters. 2 of them are conservatives, and 1 is a liberal. I get along great with all of them. Doesn't matter to me. When the subject comes up, I just tiptoe around it. My sister starts saying, yeah, this guy's a bum and you should vote for it. Okay, how's Uncle Joe? Yeah, I saw him. See, I just know how to go around it because I know that this is a factor. If you don't know that, you can get embroiled in an argument. Right?
Get in some big trouble.
And that could ruin the relationship. Right. So I had this theory going back many, many years that every organism is unique. Every person is unique. Some people are rabbits. Some people are birds. Some people are fishes. And I'll tell you what I mean. Rabbits, boy, they can really run. They can't swim or fly. But if you get somebody who's a fish, he can really swim, but he can't walk, let alone run, and he can't fly. See, you get somebody who's a bird. Well, birds can't walk too well. They can't really swim, but boy, can they fly. So you find the best in the person and go with it. And I've been doing that my whole life. So
that's just going to make for a better. That's just going to make for a better life of yourself if you can understand how to navigate those relationships. And that's where Septemics is going to come in and help you.
Right. So even before I had the idea of writing the book, as I said earlier, I had a lot of this data because it just fell out in front of me. This goes back many decades before I wrote the book. The book, Septemics, was born when I put that 7th level into that 6th level scale and it manifested mathematics. And for those of you who are allergic to math, let me put it this way. The whole point of math is you start with a formula or an equation and you coax data out of it. That is what math is about. That is how Einstein found E equals mc squared. Everybody who knows advanced math and physics can follow exactly what steps he took to get to that end. So when you have data up here, that's a mathematical phenomenon. So when I saw all that data jump out at me, and it went from being a line to being a plane, I said, whoa, this has got math in it. So that's how I knew this was natural law. And I just proceeded, and it just keeps proving itself to be natural law over and over and over. People get it. They use it. I mean, I have one reader, for example, who told me he carries the book around with him so that when a situation comes up, he can just look.
He's got a quick reference.
Yeah, she's a level 3 in this scale. Okay. Now you know what to do. So
that's amazing, Jim.
This is
the work that you've done and just how you bring it out to everyone. This is just, it's mind-blowing to me.
Right.
In a good way.
This really works. That is the main thing. You have to realize the ultimate goal of a scientist is to create a theory, like the theory of relativity or the theory of evolution, right? That's the holy grail of science. The end product for an engineer is a thing that works, whether it's an iPad, an automobile, an air conditioner, a refrigerator, an airplane. It has to work. You can't have the airplane fall out of the sky. Whoops. Engineers are not allowed to say whoops. You have to get it right. So we have all of these ways of doing things to make sure we get it right. We have factors of error. Right? So I talked earlier about, you said, oh, I want a bridge over here. So I would calculate, according to the how wide and how long it is, how much, assuming the bridge was completely full with cars, I could calculate how much weight it had to hold. And I'll get a certain number. I'm not going to use that number. I'm going to add 10%. And that is the number that I'm going to use. It has to have this number we calculated plus 10%. See, that is how engineering is done. Now, the world we live in now is a world created by engineers. You and I are walking through machines that were created by engineers. That is what industrialized society is. You go all the way back to James Watt, who revolutionized the steam engine. They knew about steam engines, but he figured out a way to put it in a boat, figured out a way to make it work in factories. That created the Industrial Revolution. So we didn't need windmills that don't work when there's no wind, or horses pulling the thing around. We just put water in it, we heat it up. Here's the mechanics of it.
There you go.
And it goes. It never gets tired. It never needs overtime. It never gets sick, right? It works. That's the world we live in now. So I can go online anytime I want, 2 o'clock in the morning, and look something up. Because the engineers at Apple, I use Apple devices, the engineers at Apple over the decades, cumulatively between them, had worked this out. This is what the voltage should be. This is how where the resistor should go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? That is what I did with Septemics. I used that engineering approach. I took the data that was presented to me by my direct observation, and then I spent 20 years crafting it into something. Because let me explain something. Remember I told you in 1995, I had 32 scales. That's not enough to make a workable technology. Scales. If you look at the book, yes, there's a scale, but it's presented, and remember I told you, in a table. So it gives you a whole body of data where you can look at it and say, that's why that's like that. This fits in over here. When you really, I explain with specificity why it's like that, what that means. For example, 7 of the scales have built into them just naturally inflow, outflow. Well, that's from physics, isn't it? Inflow, outflow. Like AC, right? In the United States, the current goes one way for 60th of a second. It goes another way for 60th of a second, right? So that's inflow, outflow. Now, when you talk about people, you don't say inflow, outflow, you say reach and withdraw. That's all you can do as a person. You can either reach or you can withdraw, right? So the guy goes to a buffet. He pays his $20 for the buffet. Roast beef, I like that. He reaches for it. Next time he gets to potatoes, I don't like potatoes. He goes past it. He's withdrawing from it. That's all you can do.
Yeah.
So 7 of these scales have reach and withdraw built into them. It's mathematical. So when you go from one level to the next, you are reversing polarity. That is an engineering datum. That is a scientific phenomenon, reversal of polarity. And so you really can see, if you study this, why it's the way it is and why it has to be that way. People who are in the STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, they're very skeptical. See, they're like people from Missouri. Show me. Show me state.
The show me state. Yep.
Okay, you're claiming this work. They want to test it. It's like you do a math problem and then you prove it to make sure you got it right. So that is how I am. That's how I approach everything. So I'm interested in the fact. Sometimes you talk to people and they go blah, 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 blah. I say, okay, just tell me what happened.
Yep.
This happens with the police all the time. Police get called. Yeah, hello, I just shot somebody, 3 o'clock in the morning, broke into my house. So the police go down. They say, tell me what happened. They don't want to hear, I was upset and I was afraid. They want to hear, the guy came into your house. Have you ever seen this person before? No.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got a gun nearby? Yes. Were you afraid for your life? Yes. How did you come in? Well, you can see he broke through the window.
He busted the door or the window. Yep.
Wait, the guy, please look at it. Yes, see, that's what they want. That's how I am. So I had a client actually once who came to me and said, I think I found a septemic scale. I said, great, send it over. Let me look at it.
Yeah.
Well, it had 7 levels, but it wasn't a septemic scale.
No.
And I told him that.
Yeah.
It did not meet the rigorous standards that I demand of this. This has to fit together mathematically. Just like when Galileo, there's the story about he went up on the Tower of Pisa and he dropped one big thing and one little thing, and they both hit the ground at the same time. See? And he proved that the acceleration of gravity is constant no matter the weight of the thing.
Yep.
So that's sort of how this came about. So what you're getting here is human affairs through the mind of an engineer. That's why I wrote the book. That's why I spent 25 years working on the book. And that's why I'm doing this video, to explain to people, Mrs. Smith, who's watching this now, you are on these 35 scales somewhere. And she's probably going to say, really? And if she reaches, yeah, I'm at level 3. I see. I wonder what my husband is. He's at level 4. See, every time this happens, you have a realization. You find yourself at level 3. That explains why I'm good at this. I'm at level 3. So, for example, most Americans know about the conflict, the famous historical conflict between Hamilton and Jefferson, right? Founding fathers. They were enemies. It wasn't so much that Hamilton hated Jefferson, but Jefferson despised Hamilton. Now, most people just sort of accept the fact. I analyzed it. I figured out Hamilton is at level 2 on the scale of basic purposes. That's leader. His goal was to conquer. And if you study the man, which I did, it's clear he wanted to conquer. He left college, which the college we now call Columbia University, to join the militia to fight the British. By the time he was 22, he was a colonel. And Washington, when he saw him, he said, whoa, I need this guy. And Washington kept him at his elbow all the way through the war. And Hamilton kept saying to Washington, give me a command. Let me lead a command. No, I need you. Because, again, we talk about Washington. Washington could see this guy was a lot smarter than he was. He was the higher level on the scale of basic purposes. And if you go through Hamilton's life, it's not subtle. Once you know this, and he came to an untimely demise, which happens to most leaders. Lincoln was also a leader. Alexander the Great was also a leader. So once you understand, if you study Lincoln and realize he was at level 2, he wanted to conquer. His whole thing was to conquer the Confederacy. He got almost no help from anybody. His cabinet was not helpful. His generals wouldn't fight for him. The people were not behind him. There were riots. He was determined to defeat the Confederacy. And until he found an obscure general named Grant, who had just conquered Vicksburg, which was the biggest victory they had had, he had a lot of trouble. And Grant's buddy, Sherman, also like that. Those two generals won the war for him.
They did.
Many of the people around him were not level 2. They were not interested in conquest. Who was the guy he first had in command? McClellan. McClellan was not a leader. He didn't want to fight. He kept making excuses. We need another 1,000 cannon. Get the cannon. We need another 500 horses. Okay, that's fine.
There was
but
always
we need
something.
Another 200 pistols. He wouldn't fight. Lincoln finally got rid of him.
Yeah, he just kept making excuses and excuses.
Once he got Grant mopped up the place.
Changed the whole trajectory.
He was willing to fight. Right. So this is how knowing where a person is at tells you a lot. So, if you're looking somebody to lead the Department of Defense, you don't want somebody at level 2. Now, I talked before about some guy who figures out his girlfriend is money motivated, right? We don't know what he's going to do with it. He might marry her. He might break up with her. We don't know. But any way you look at it, he understands her better now, whatever he does with it. But let's say this guy has an automobile dealership. He's in the business of selling cars. So he needs a new salesman. So he interviews people, right? He runs an ad. Guy comes in. So he's talking to this guy. And as he's talking to him, it comes out that the guy's money motivated. You know, the type of person who's a money motivated person. That's what he wants. That's important to him.
Yeah.
He's hired.
Mm-hmm.
If he's smart, he doesn't care who he voted for. He doesn't care if he knows the difference between a gerund and a participle. He doesn't know if he knows who Socrates is. He is motivated to sell those cars. You're hired. You see, that's how you use this to your advantage. He might not want to be personal friends with him. He might not want to hang out with somebody who's money motivated.
But for his business, it makes sense.
That's right. So you find the person that fits in just right. I'll tell you a story. Many years ago, I was in my 20s. I've been employing people. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. So I ran an ad and I got an application. I got it out to 2 people. And I finally made a decision. So just to be respectful and polite, I invited both of these candidates to my apartment so I could tell them personally who I was hiring and why. So the first woman comes in. I said, "You're a terrific guy. You have all the qualifications, but I decided I'm not going to hire you." She was surprised. She said, "Well, who are you hiring?" And I said, "Well, you probably don't know her, but I'm going to hire so-and-so." She said, "I know her." And she said to me, and I quote, she said, "You mean you're going to hire her over me?" What I did not say to her, because I'm a gentleman, is, "That's why I'm hiring her, because she doesn't have that attitude." So the second woman came in while the first person was leaving and said, "Oh, you know, they didn't know they had applied for the same job. How are you? How have you been?" So I hired the second one. And that second woman was like a dream. She worked for me for a year and a half. She was perfect. Even at that young age, I could see, even though their qualifications were similar, that this is a person who was going to fit in. So now I would have been able to figure that out faster and easier, that this was
Absolutely.
But I was smart enough then to say, and she did. She fit in perfectly. No arguments, no difficulties. She was always prepared. She did everything. She gave me notice when she wanted to leave. This other woman would have been in a lot of trouble. I could see that.
Right.
You see, before she said to me, "You mean you're going to her instead of me?" I could
You knew
see
you made
that.
the right choice.
Right. So that's what this is about. Finding the right person for the context. So it's not really that it's good or bad. I don't use the word good or bad. Very often people tell me, "Is that good? Is that bad?" And I don't really go with that. I go, "Well, it's this way."
Mm-hmm.
You know, that is an engineering way of looking at it. So, you know, an engineer, he's not going to say this is good or this is bad. He's going to say, well, for the purposes that we need, this is the material you should use because it has these specific data and they correspond to the usage you're requiring. It's not really good or bad. It's just specific. And I'll tell you something else I learned a long time ago in handling my clients. A person never knows why he's upset. Never. He thinks he knows, but when he actually finds out why he's upset, he stops being upset at that instant. I did this with clients 1,000 times. I got it down to the specifics. And you can use biofeedback on this because these things, these thoughts, they show up in biofeedback. So I could find out from the biofeedback what the specific thing is. I say, "Is it this?" "How did you know?" "Yes, it was." He's not upset anymore. So what the point is that specificity dispels upsets. So a guy is mad at his mother. "She ruined my life. She's a bad person." Rah, 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 rah. Lots of people like that. So now he analyzes her against the 35 scales. He's not going to be upset. You know why? It's specific. Well, she's at this level. So, for example, I grew up in New York City. So I knew lots of Jewish people. Most of my best friends were Jewish. Okay? Now, you would think I'm probably the type of guy who would hate Hitler. I don't hate Hitler. Yes, he was a psychopathic mass murderer. Yes, he was an ignorant, crazy, stupid person. But I don't hate him. How does that help anything? That's
Right.
not going to bring back anybody, but I know what he is. I know he's at level 7 on the scale of basic purposes. There aren't too many people at that level, by the way, thankfully. So I know,
Thank goodness.
yes, it dispels the type of stress that people have because you're not upset because it's specific.
Yep.
So,
And it gives you an
right,
understanding of how other people act as well. And
right,
the idea that you can have a better mindset yourself going into situations. I think that's just
that's right.
absolutely amazing.
That's right. Like most people, right? You say, oh, there's a discussion between William F. Buckley and Noam Chomsky. Most people are going to take sides in that,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're going to say, oh, Chomsky's a liberal, I'm with him, or Buckley's a conservative. I don't look at it that way. Chomsky has these opinions. Buckley has these opinions. These are two highly educated, intelligent people. So there's no emotion involved. So that is why I'll tell you a true story. I had a girlfriend who I was with for 4 years. We were engaged. And, I really loved this girl. So I was always traveling out on business. I was a very busy guy. So she comes over and she said, remember that weekend when you were away, I slept with my old boyfriend. Really? What happened? And she told me. I didn't get mad. I didn't criticize her. I was flattered that she told me. I had no idea. It shows that our rapport was so good that she could trust me to listen to something like that and know that I was not going to get upset. And she was right. I didn't get upset. Thank you for telling me. I appreciate your candor. And we just went on. Most guys, they would have got hurt, would have got sad, or they would have got angry, or they would have broken. This was a very wonderful person. Smart, pretty, funny, talented person. Okay. So, she did it. It's over. She told me. That's the end of it. No emotion. Now, if there was any emotion, it would have been affection. Come on, honey, let's go for dinner. So that is a formula for success. Now, the reason I mentioned that is Septemics dispels emotions. I'm not saying to not have emotion with the people you love.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I love my son and my sisters, but when something comes up, I can analyze it and I can see exactly what's happening. You can say, okay, I can see my son is at this level on this scale. That's what I'm dealing with. He's not a rose, he's a tulip. They're completely different. A tulip grows from a bulb out of the ground. A rose grows on a bush, it's full of thorns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So you can see exactly what it is. So because of that, I don't have negative emotion. So I can look at somebody and separate the good from the bad, so to speak. Like, I'll give you a famous example that everybody knows. Everybody knows Bill Clinton is a smart man.
Mm-hmm.
Even his opponents admit that. He was a Rhodes Scholar. You ever listen to him speak?
Mm-hmm.
He's very smart. Okay? I love to listen to him speak. It doesn't mean I agree with him about everything, but he's somebody, if he talks, I want to listen. If you said, hey, Jim, Bill Clinton's coming over, you want to be there? You want to join? I'll be right over there. Okay? Now, it's also publicly known that he's a serial abuser of women. This is no secret. It's been in the news for 30 years. We have women who came forward and said with specificity on video that he raped them. And several of them sued him and got money. If I had a sister or a daughter, I'd say, don't go out with Bill Clinton.
Right.
Right? Out of my love for them. I don't want them to get into a bad situation.
Right.
Doesn't mean I hate Bill Clinton. If somebody's going to talk about politics, I can't think of anybody I'd rather hear talk about politics rather than Bill Clinton. He's like Newt Gingrich. He's another guy. Very smart man. They were on opposite parties, but they worked together. Between them, they balanced 4 budgets. That's the last time that ever happened in the United States.
Only time I've seen it in my lifetime.
You can say, if you want, that the Republicans forced him into it. There's some truth to that. But Bill Clinton was smart enough to see the mood of the country, see what the voters want, and give them what they want. And so he got reelected by doing that.
He did.
So I'm not saying Clinton good and Gingrich bad or Gingrich good. I'm not looking at it that way. I don't parse it that way. It's not helpful. Is this a good person or a bad person? Now, there are some people in the world who you could say, okay, this guy's a psychopathic murderer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that bad? Well, yeah, murdering people that's about as bad as it gets. Political science is one of my areas of expertise. So I've been watching the hearings for the
Yes.
nominations for cabinet and
Mm-hmm.
watching hatred, vicious attacks. Okay. Wasn't like that 50 years ago or
No.
even 40 years ago. It was different. Okay. I'm not going to vote for you. I disagree with you, but
Exactly.
it was not this kind of derangement of, with the veins bulging out of the neck, and this
Exactly. And
acting Hitlerian. So that's one of the ways that our country is much worse than it used to be.
and you know what? I agree with you on that, Jim, because I say this all the time. We used to be a country where you and I could have completely different political opinions, but we'd still be friends because there's
That's
other
right.
things that we realize that we have in common that can both
That's right.
promote the self-well-being of both of us. But now it just
Yeah.
seems like if you don't agree with me, you're wrong, and I want
Yeah.
nothing to
You
do with
get to
you.
me.
Yep.
That's we're allowing the emotion to overrule the intellect.
And the
You know,
logic, really, logical decisions.
I talked to you about my being a mathematician, taking 26 semesters of math. I love. I had the same math teacher 2 years in a row. This guy was like a genius. He was like the best math teacher I ever had. And he was not a nice person. I could tell you a lot of things about him. I
Mm-hmm.
found out he was anti-Semitic. He was probably
Really?
a Nazi. Yeah.
Goodness.
And I only found that out because he lived in the same part of the city that I lived in. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we were like going home from school together, you see, and we got to like talk a little bit, which was
Yeah.
fine with me. I did that with all my teachers,
Mm-hmm.
And I got this guy, when a guy he gives you that verbiage, you can see, oh, this guy's a Nazi,
Mm-hmm.
Was
Yep.
a brilliant math teacher. I am indebted to that man. He made me a mathematician. When I came to
Yeah.
him, I was not a mathematician. I was just a smart kid who got good grades in math. By the time he finished with me, I thought in math. I really
Yeah.
understood what it was about, so that it interfaces with the physical universe, and got the idea of it's the language of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And now, do I decry his anti-Semitism? Yes.
Absolutely.
I wasn't going to say that to him, right? I was his student, and I was getting high grades. I was one of his best students,
Mm-hmm.
get very, very high grades. And so that's why he spoke to me, because I was with him for 2 years, and I kept getting
Yeah.
96, 97, 98. See, he could see I
Yeah.
was smart. I asked the right questions. I didn't cause any trouble. So
Mm-hmm.
he kind of opened up to me a little bit because he
Right.
liked me.
Yep.
So I took the best from this guy. This guy was like
Exactly.
a math whiz, and I benefited from that.
And
And
see,
he
had you
did
never
things.
had those, if you'd never had those conversations with him outside of the class, you would have never been any the wiser, but you still would have
I,
had that great
I
experience
would
of
have known.
learning mathematics.
I would have known that. You might have a mother who is at level 6 on the scale of basic purposes. If that's true, you're going to have a long history of difficulty. So you see these people, they are disaffected with their mother. They discontinue the relationship. That person might be at level 6. Now, if this person had found that out 30 years earlier, it would have changed his life. He would have
Yeah.
said, "Oh, I see." So it's very easy for me to see, okay, this guy's at this level. I know what I'm dealing with. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just like cats and dogs are different, period.
Period.
If you try to treat a cat the way you treat a dog, that cat will hate you. You have to know how to treat a cat. They're not going to play fetch. They're not going to sit down when you tell them to. They're different. Again, it's not good or bad, but they're different. So I know how to deal with dogs. I know how to deal with cats. They're very different ways of dealing with them. So I get along great with cats and with dogs.
Right.
And people are this way. This guy is a dog. This guy is a cat. You know
Yeah.
who Sparky Anderson is?
I don't.
He's in the Baseball Hall of Fame, one of the great managers of all time.
Okay.
Widely regarded as one of the most brilliant managers. Had fantastic results with his teams. One of his players recently said, Pete Rose said this, Pete Rose wife. He said that Sparky Anderson knew better than anyone else he ever knew how to handle people. He said he knew that some guys needed a pat on the back and some guys needed a kick in the butt. And he knew which guys needed what. And that's how he dealt with them. And that's how he got those fantastic results that he got.
Right.
You know, the Big Red Machine, 1976, one of the greatest teams of all time. That's Sparky Anderson. He knew how to manage those people. He had 4 guys on that team. I think they're all in the Hall of Fame now. He just let them alone. He
Just
never
let them
told
do
them
their
anything.
thing.
That's right. He just knew, these guys know what they're doing. I'm not going to tell them anything. He'd say, hello, how are you? You know, how's your wife? That's it.
Mm-hmm.
The other 21 guys, he had to pay attention. He had to tell them, do that. Don't do that. I don't want to see this. So that's like, in a very crude, primitive way. It's like, if you can make that more sophisticated, you get what Septemics is about. And it's not only the people you're dealing with now, it's your past. So all these people in my past who I didn't get along with, who I had fights with, I have none of that now. It's all gone. I hold no grudges against anybody. People have committed crimes against me. People have committed tortious acts against me, where I went to court and won because of what they... I'm not mad at them because I was able to parse it through Septemics. Okay, this person is at that level. Like this one defendant, I finally figured out, this person is at that level. That explains a lot. And then the person went down to a low level. Oh, now I see what's going on. Now this person, and it's like textbook stuff. You know, it's like very easy to see this because people tell you the levels. They tell you.
Or they at least show it to us.
Well, when I say tell, that doesn't necessarily mean they're using words.
Using their mouth,
They tell you
actions,
one way or another.
whatever.
Right. They tell you their levels. So, you know what I say? Shut up and listen. That's what I do with my clients.
Makes for a better life outcome and less stress.
Right. That's right. So now I have to tell you in all candor, and you can talk to, if you want to get the FBI to do background checks on me, they will find, you can't find anybody who says, Jim got upset, Jim was worried, Jim was critical, Jim was hostile. Doesn't happen because I see what's there. I know what I'm dealing with. You want to be able to be in complete control of your emotions, and Septemics helps you with that. It tells you across 35 axes what is going on with these people.
And even yourself.
And yourself, too. And I'll tell you something I actually do in this regard. You know, sometimes you go to some authoritarian figure that you have to go to, like DMV, right? Or the person the nurse at the desk at the hospital, you know, somebody you cannot avoid, you know, or a policeman. You can't just get rid of them and not pay attention.
Right.
Okay. Well, I learned a long time ago, like let's say you want to get some paper approved with some government agency, and you get this person, and the person will not approve it. I can see this is a downscale person. I can just see. It doesn't matter what I do, is it? I just leave and come back when there's another person. Exact same paperwork, give it to the person, goes right through.
Yep, don't change anything. It's just,
I don't get upset. I don't argue with the person, you know. A lot of people argue, you know, they get mad. And I don't do that. Just, okay, this person is low on the scale of control. And so this control freak is not going to allow me to get this paper through. So I just come back another time. I get a normal person who looks at you, says hello, looks like he could be married and have a family, and give him the paper. Oh, fine, stamps it, you're done.
Yep. Well, and you saved yourself frustration and emotion by just saying, okay, this is how they are, and I'll just come back when there's someone else here.
Yeah, and I didn't give up.
Yep.
See, I didn't give up.
I definitely see the value in this, learning these things just for the simple peace of mind of reducing stress in your life,
Yes.
having some understanding about other people and yourself. I can't see any way that this is going to hurt you.
And I'll tell you something else. If you get somebody else to look at this material, that could save your relationship with that person. Let's say,
Yeah.
person's giving you a hard time, and you can see that he's at a certain level on a certain scale. Show him the scale. He looks at it. He says, well, oh, yeah, this makes sense. And that might save your relationship because now he sees what's going on. So it reduces your own stress, but it also could reduce the stress of the other person and make it so that you can have a rapport.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Or
start
the other
building
thing is,
relationships. Yep.
sometimes you run into somebody who's at or near the bottom of several scales. I had somebody many years ago like this, and there was really no way for me to get around this person to know what level you are at. And you have to know
Exactly.
what level they're at. And that's what you get from this. And it's across 35 axes. So this is astonishingly broad. I'll tell you something else. There are general scales and specific scales, and they're labeled as such. In a
Right.
general scale, once you find your level, you're done. Like basic purpose. You find your basic purpose, life-changing moment. You throw out the other 6 levels, you know what you're about, and it clarifies your life. But you're done with that scale. It's not about context. But a specific scale has a context. So
Gotcha.
I mentioned the scale of motivation. What is my motivation toward my mother? That's one context. Is my motivation toward my father? Different context. See?
Totally
You're going to get a
separate. Yep.
different answer. So it's 35 scales, but many of these scales you can use hundreds of different times in hundreds of different ways. So it really goes into thousands and thousands
Wow.
of ways to use this because it's a specific scale.
So you
So
can
let's
use this
say,
literally in anything in
right,
your life that you come across.
personally, not be upset, deal with the person with respect, and decide, is this the right person for me or is it not?
Yep.
Who
You
you
get to
want to stay
surround
away
yourself.
from,
Yeah, exactly. You can
and who
start
you want
making
to have.
your network then becomes more meaningful.
Right. But the best thing about this is I go years at a time without ever getting upset, without ever worrying about anything, about ever getting angry at anything. It's not like bad things don't happen. Banks make mistakes. People cheat you of money online, All the time, people crash into you with a car. It's not that things don't happen. They happen. It's how you deal with it.
Yes.
How you relate to the person, knowing where you are, who you are, and maintaining your intellectual clarity about what is this about. So this is really helpful in making your life calm, under control. And I urge people to take advantage of this. And the way to take advantage is to go to my website, which is septemics.com, Septemics, where you can see what many readers have said, what many journalists have written, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself. And there's even a 15-minute pre-recorded introduction to Septemics that you can listen to, which explains it to a new person in 15 minutes.
Yep. And I recommend to every listener to go out there and listen to that. I listened to it before Jim came on the show, and it's a great introduction to the topic and to Septemics, and it's going to make you want more like I did. And that's why Jim's here. And that's that website again is septemics.com.
The data in Septemics is vital for every person. It can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Just a Dude podcast. I am your host, Nathan. We had the pleasure of sitting down with Jim Marshall, the mastermind behind Septemics, and Jim was able to share with us his revolutionary system for understanding human behavior and development through the lens of 35 scales, each with 7 levels of progression. We delved into how Septemics can offer a new perspective on personal growth, relationships, and even the broader aspects of human affairs. It was fascinating to hear how this science could potentially unlock human potential and guide us towards better life choices. Jim's insights have truly given us a lot to think about, whether we're looking to improve ourselves or understand the world around us a bit better. We truly appreciate Jim for bringing such a profound yet practical knowledge to the show. Remember, it's not just about where you are, but where you're heading, and Septemics might just be the map you need. Thanks for listening, for your support, and for being part of the community. Keep pushing forward, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next episode.